All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of the great millstone who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today is Monday, May 12th, 2025, Missile Monday. And I have a couple articles. This first one I have is from Al Jazeera, and it says, could India, Pakistan use nuclear weapons? Here's what their doctrines say. And I also have another one from the Jerusalem Times, So I'm just going to read a little bit, of both articles, and I'll bring out a few scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. And recently, you had India and Pakistan, pretty much, they are at war, So just read, some of this. So it says a full-blown war between India and Pakistan will be the first ever between two nuclear-armed nations for now. Pakistan said it struck multiple Indian military bases in the early hours of Saturday, May 10th, after claiming that India had launched missiles against 3 Pakistani bases, marking a sharp escalation in their already soaring tensions. As the neighbors edge closer to an all-out war, long simmering hostilities, mostly over the disputed region of Kashmir, erupted into renewed fighting after the deadly April 22nd Pahalgam attack in India administered Kashmir that saw 25 tourists and a local guide killed in an armed group attack. India blamed Pakistan for the attack. Islamabad denied any role. Since then, the nations engaged in a series of tit-for-tat moves that began with diplomatic steps, but have reportedly turned into aerial military confrontation. As both sides escalate shelling and missile attacks and seem on the road to a full-scale battle, an unprecedented reality stares not just at the 1.6 billion people of India and Pakistan, but at the world. An all-out war between them would be the first ever between two nuclear-armed nations. And again, I say for now, because as we know or should know, by now, there is going to be a war between two nuclear-armed nations, and that's going to be Russia and the United States, And India and Pakistan are 2 of the 10, because Iran, they now have, nuclear, missiles as well. But India and Pakistan are 2 of the 10 nuclear-armed nations, And it wouldn't be, the first, because again, the small hats, they have missiles over there in the land as well, But as we know, World War III, again, as one of the Chicago brothers said, at camp, this past Saturday, right now World War III is a Cold War, but it's eventually going to build up, to a hot war, and we're seeing that, it's still a build up, and India and Pakistan, they won't use nukes against each other, depending on how long, their war lasts against each other, we'll see. But for those that don't know, the Indians and Pakistanis, over there, they're the same people, Elam, so-called East Indians, They're the same people, or the Persians, if you will, you know. So I'm just going to read a little bit more. So it says, it would be stupid for either side to launch a nuclear attack on the other because Pakistan is right next to India. So much like, with Russia and Ukraine, it would be crazy for Russia to nuke Ukraine because, again, it would damage, parts of Russia as well. So, again, that wouldn't be wise for India or Pakistan to launch a nuke because, again, it's going to, they're going to damage their own land either way it goes. So, no, it wouldn't be a wise thing to do that. It says, it is way short of probable that nuclear weapons are used, but that does not mean it's impossible. Dan Smith, director of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, told Al Jazeera. So how did we get here? What are the nuclear arsenals of India and Pakistan like? And when, according to them, might they use nuclear weapons? Well, that's easy during World War III to help take down Babylon. But this is just to give a little background on that. So it says how tensions have spiraled since April 22nd. India has long accused the Resistance Front, TRF, the armed group that initially claimed credit for the Pahalgam attack, before then distancing itself from the killings, of being a proxy for the Lashkar-e-Taiba, if I pronounced that correctly. It says a Pakistan-based armed group that has reportedly targeted India, including in 2008 Mumbai attacks that left more than 160 people dead. New Delhi blamed Islamabad for the Pahalgam attack. Pakistan denied any role. India withdrew from a bilateral pact on water sharing, and both sides scaled back diplomatic missions and expelled each other's citizens. Pakistan also threatened to walk out of other bilateral pacts, including the 1972 Simla Agreement that bound the neighbors to a ceasefire line in disputed Kashmir, known as the Line of Control. But on May 7th, India launched a wave of missile attacks against sites in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. It claimed to hit terrorist infrastructure, but Pakistan says at least 31 civilians, including 2 children, were killed. On May 8th, India launched 2 drones into Pakistani airspace, reaching the country's major cities. India claimed it was retaliating and that Pakistan had fired missiles and drones at it. Then, for 2 nights in a row, cities in India and Indian-administered Kashmir reported explosions that New Delhi claimed were the result of attempted Pakistani attacks that were thwarted. It says Pakistan has denied sending missiles and drones into India on May 8th and 9th, but that changed in the early hours of May 10th, when Pakistan first claimed that India targeted 3 bases with missiles. Soon after, Pakistan claimed it struck at least 7 Indian bases. India had not responded either to Pakistan's claims that their bases were hit or to Islamabad's allegation that New Delhi launched missiles at its military installations. So again, you see, they're sending missiles back and forth, man. and it's only been 3 days, so this is pretty much what they have right now. So these are the fighter jets that India has, the Shamshir Jaguar, the Vajra Mirage, and then you see what Pakistan has, these particular fighter jets and when they were deployed, and it says each, missiles with nuclear warheads. So India has 180 plus, so we're just going to say over 180, nuclear missiles with warheads. And they have the K4, the K15, the Agni 5 or the Agni 1 through 5, the Prith 6, the Praha AR, the Nirbe, and the BrahMos. Those are what India possesses, and Pakistan has, over 170, nuclear missiles, So India has, or Pakistan, Slovakia has the HATF, 1 through 9, and the Shaheen 3 and the Abadil, and clearly, you see this is the largest weapon that they have in their arsenal. In India, it's just a tie, at least, the Agni 2 would be their largest missile, height-wise, but yeah, man, this just goes to show you that things are heating up, and just like, Russia and Ukraine, India and Pakistan are at war, and, we'll see with, what's going on with China and Taiwan, later. So just going to get a little bit of this other article, from the Jerusalem Post. So it says, U.S. nuclear talks may be collapsing and Iran is worried. Analysis says Iran is becoming increasingly concerned that nuclear talks with the U.S. will collapse. The message coming from Tehran and other observers is that Iran went into the talks with some suspicion, divided between the optimism that underpinned the Iranian president's approach and the pessimism that underpinned the supreme leader's views of the same talks. For this reason, Iran insisted on indirect talks with Oman, which soon moved to Italy and then back to Oman. Oman is the host country, and it played a key role in the ceasefire that ended the U.S. airstrikes on the Houthis. However, after initial success in April, the talks in May have hit a wall. It is not clear if things can be salvaged this week. U.S. President Donald Trump is heading to the Gulf, and therefore the talks come at a sensitive time. Trump and his special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, could suddenly pull a rabbit out of a hat and proceed in a way that is acceptable to Iran. Alternatively, recent messaging from Washington has spoken about dismantling Iran's nuclear program and preventing enrichment. Iran will not accept these terms because that's pretty much what the U.S. wants to do. It wants them to, pretty much stop, developing, their uranium, or to pretty much stop their uranium enrichment, which is what they need to develop nuclear weapons, which again, Iran has already done, but the U.S. wants them to stop, and as we know, Iran, is one of those key countries that is going to play a major role in taking this place out. Because what does it say in Ezekiel 38? That Russia is going to be a guard unto these different nations, these different, Arab, Hamite, and, Elamite nations, So I was going to read a little more. It says Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, if I pronounced that correctly, said Iran has declared the acquisition and use of nuclear weapons as forbidden and has always been a committed member of the international. Slakia jumped. All right, Slakia, there you go. It says, and has always been a committed member of the international non-proliferation regime, but at the same time, it insists on its right to peaceful uses of nuclear energy, including enrichment. He made this statement at a conference in Doha, which is very friendly toward Iran, and Doha also enjoys close ties with the West. It would prefer that the Iran deal move forward. Says we are not seeking nuclear weapons, and weapons of mass destruction have no place in Iran's security doctrine. That is why we were among the initiators of creating a nuclear-free zone in the West Asian region, Iran's top diplomat said. So again, man, it doesn't matter. They already got them, They already got nukes, and they're going to use them, when that time comes. None of these arrows are going to be spared, because that's just one of the many names for these nuclear missiles, So I'm going to leave, the link to both of these articles in the description box. Didn't want to make this one too long. I'm going to start with the book of Joel, chapter 3, and verse 9. And it says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say I'm strong. So right, man, we're clearly seeing that with these different nations, man, that are pretty much exhausting their resources into, developing these weapons of war, or just exhausting their resources into, their military in general, because again, man, these countries, they're supposed to be, putting their resources toward, agriculture, building their, their country up. But instead, during this time that we're in, which we're in a time of war, these different nations are, beefing up, their military, if you will, and we can clearly see that, man. And again, let the weak sound strong. These different nations that have nuclear weapons, man, because again, at one time, the United States was the only country that possessed this type of technology. But after the years progress, we clearly see other nations have, the very same technology as well, and their primary nation being Russia, because the United States and Russia, were at an arms race, and, the late, I want to say the mid to late 1940s, throughout the 50s. And we clearly see that, they're still pretty much at an arms race today, because Russia and America, both possess the most nuclear missiles, but Russia has more, which again is biblical prophecy, because Russia on a smaller scale is going to be, that force that is going to take America down. But as we know, on a much larger scale, our Lord Yahweh Shai, along with the angels, are going to destroy this place, Babylon, So I'm going to get the book of Isaiah, chapter 9 and verse 5. And it says, for every battle of the warrior is with confused noise, and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. So right, man, this isn't going to be a traditional war like, old ancient combat used to be, guerrilla warfare, hand-to-hand combat, men having these different weapons of war, swords, spears, shields, bow and arrows, charging each other in the center of the battlefield, man. It's not going to be a traditional war. Now, I always make mention that you will have ground troops that are going to be, going to war with each other. But World War III, is primarily going to be fought with these missiles, because this is the war to end our wars, man. These weapons literally have the capability of destroying the whole earth. But as it says in the scriptures, man, the earth abideth forever. So only certain parts of only certain parts of the world are going to get hit, but the entire earth itself will not be destroyed, So I'm going to get Isaiah chapter 54 and verse 16. It says, Behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work. And I have created the waster to destroy and right. The modern day smith, the modern day blacksmith, would be these scientists and physicists that are behind creating and developing these nuclear weapons, man. And another thing that, a brother brought out in the camp is that, again, man, Amalek is behind this, man, because J. Robert Oppenheimer and even Albert Einstein, they're small hats, man. They're Amalekites, because that's one thing, Albert Einstein said, I know, Slakia, World War IV will be, I know not what World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Now, he knew because it pretty much shows you in the movie Oppenheimer, like he knew that, what the United States was doing and the technology that they were creating, and the devastation of it, he knew. But either way it goes, that just goes to show you, even though, again, there's not going to be a World War IV, because World War III is going to be the war to end all wars, man. But again, that's the waster to destroy these nuclear missiles, and these scientists are creating these weapons of war, So I'm going to jump to Revelation chapter 9 and verse 12. And it says, One woe is past, and behold, there come 2 woes more after. So that first woe being World War I, which was a very devastating war, that took place, in the early 1900s, say from about I forget the exact years, but I think I want to say about from 1915 to about 1919, somewhere around there, So jump to Revelation chapter 11 and verse 14, and it says, The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly and right, man. World War I was an extremely devastating and destructive war. But guess what? World War II was even more devastating and destructive, man. Europe got tore up, during that war. But what does it say? The third woe cometh quickly, meaning World War III is coming quickly, man. And we're seeing the build up to it. These different nations that are at war with each other. Again, you have Russia and Ukraine, India and Pakistan, Israel and, the small heads, but, those Israelis and, Ishmael over there, you have these different nations that are at war with each other. And ultimately, when that time comes, all of these nations are going to be against America. Even America's allies are going to be against her, So real quick, I'm going to jump back to Isaiah and get Isaiah chapter 13 in verse 4. And it says, The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, A tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. And right, man, as we know, Esau's blessing is the sword, and his ultimate sword would be these nuclear missiles, man, you know. But what does it say? These are the weapons of the Lord's indignation, man. These are the weapons of the Lord's righteous anger, which he's going to use to do what? To take Esau, Edom, out of power, to destroy Babylon. Just like it says, to destroy the whole land. So these missiles are going to be shot from one end of the earth and land on the other side, because all of these different, missiles are, aimed at America, so you can guarantee that thousands upon thousands of warheads are going to hit this place, man. This land is literally going to be pelted, It's going to shake the earth, So let me see real quick. Let me grab that. This is Isaiah chapter 24 and verse 20. It says, the earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall be removed like a cottage, and the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. So right, man, there's going to be so many warheads hitting this place. It's going to shake the earth, man, But again, it's going to be held in place. The entire earth will not be destroyed, only certain places. And as we know, the only two confirmed places that are going to get hit are America and the land of Israel. The difference between the two is America is going to be completely destroyed and the land of Israel is going to be built back up, because Jerusalem, the land and the people are going to be made beautiful again, man, but this is speaking of the land, or I'm speaking of the land, Slakia, because again, our land will be cleansed again before we come back home, before the Lord brings us home, man. The land has to be cleansed. So I'm just going to get a couple more. That'll be it. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 7, and verse 1. And it says, and after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living power. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our power in their foreheads. So right, man, these are 4 literal angels holding back the 4 winds. The 4 winds represent, the destruction, i.e. World War III, the day of the Lord, if you will, because there's a particular time when these things are going to take place, because once the elect are sealed, man, the mark of the beast is made mandatory. These last few prophecies come to pass. Then this destruction is going to come to pass, So I'm going to end it with this. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 9, and verse 15. It says, and the 4 angels were loosed, which were, and the 4 angels were loose, which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the 3rd part of men. All right, man. When that appointed time comes, it's going to be a particular hour, day, month, and year when this war is going to take place, man. And it says to slay the 3rd part of men, because that's who this destruction is for, the 3rd part of men, which is the nation of Edom, the so-called white man. So you have 3 classes of men on the earth. You have the sons of God, which are all 12 tribes of Israel, from Judah down to Issachar. You have the sons of men, which are, these other heathen nations. And you have the sons of the wicked, which again are the nation of Edom, the so-called white man, the wicked. That's who this destruction is for, But 2/3 of the nation of Israel are going to get caught up in his destruction, for their wickedness. And, whatever heathens are over here, again, they're really just over here to take part in that judgment as well, But things are heating up, man. We're in a time of war. So with that, I'm going to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from, and I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till the next time I say you, Shalom.